Welcome back again to another video of my disembodied voice telling you notes. Today in psychology, we're covering schools of thought. So there's lots of different schools of thought within psychology, and I'm just going to tell you the most important ones today. Um, but basically, the different schools of thought are based on how different psychologists think we should explain the human mind and how it works. So, different psychologists think we should focus on different things. And you'll see what I mean momentarily. But a lot of scientists today, a lot of psychologists today, like to mix several of these viewpoints together instead of adhering to just one specific perspective. So here are the different schools of thought I'm going to be covering, and these are the ones I would like you to know. There's only 6, so it should be pretty good, pretty easy for you. So here we go. Structuralism is our first school of thought, and it was the first one that was thought of or created. So basically, structuralism says we should reduce all mental processes to their most basic components. And to do that, you have to use introspection. And introspection is when you look deep inside yourself and think of like the different emotions and events that had to happen and feelings and all these things that are happening as separate entities of each other in order to construct like a narrative for what you're thinking about. Um, for example, one of the tests that they would run for structuralism would be they would put a pencil down in front of you and they would say, think of this as not a pencil. Please do not call this a pencil under any circumstances. But please explain to us what this pencil is. And then you would have to describe the pencil in all its different parts and the smallest parts you could possibly imagine. So this is graphite, wood, metal, and rubber all combined into one. Crazy. Functionalism is our next one, and it was a reaction to structuralism. So, in functionalism, they wanted to explain mental processes more accurately because with structuralism, you're pretty much just relying on what people are saying to you, and they might not be telling you the whole story. So, in functionalism, with this viewpoint, they are not focusing so much on the internal thoughts, which you cannot see and record all of your internal thoughts, but on external stimuli instead. And basically, they're following along with the Darwinian mindset of evolution. So we react to things in a certain way because our bodies have evolved to react in that certain way, and everything we do is for a purpose. So, for example, if you get a paper cut or any cut, really, if you injure yourself in some way, your body feels pain, and pain is the external stimuli, and that's our body's reaction to telling us something is wrong. So, our outward reactions are for a purpose. So, the pain is for the purpose of making sure that we are not like dying. Gestalt is our next one, and this one is super interesting in my opinion. But maybe you hate Gestalt psychology, I don't know. But basically, this one is also a response to structuralism. Lots of people were having beef with structuralism. And Gestalt is basically exactly the opposite of structuralism. So instead of saying a thing is the parts broken down into the most basic parts. Gestalt says the whole. We should look at the object as a whole instead of as its broken down parts. Look at the big picture. So Gestalt psychology says that our minds prefer to look at the whole of something, and we can understand things more complexly and better if we are looking at the big picture. And our brains will fill in missing information. Pretty cool. So I have some examples on the next page. And I won't go through all of these, but a couple of the examples of Gestalt laws are the law of similarity. So in this picture, we have a ton of dots, as you can see, and 4 rows are, or I guess, yeah, rows. 4 rows are 4 rows and columns are red dots, and the bottom ones are blue dots. And you would divide it up, if you're just looking at it, you would divide it in your head into red versus blue, because we are grouping them based on what is similar. Pretty cool. And then law of proximity, we group things based on their proximity to each other. So instead of seeing this as like a whole box here, we see this as 2 rectangles of dots. So we're not putting it all together, even though this is the same picture. And then this is the last one I'm going to go over, is the law of closure. So this goes along with our brains close anything, like we like to look at things as a whole. So as you can see 4 arrows here, and they're different shapes. 2 obtuse ones and 2 acute ones. But if you're looking at this picture, your brain kind of fills in these gaps here, and you see this as like a diamond or a rhombus. I don't know shapes. I'm not a math teacher, all right, but our brain will close in those gaps and see that as a whole. Next up is psychoanalysis. This is Freud's theory. If you've heard of psychology, you've heard of Freud. Freud is a crazy, crazy man. He puts the psycho in psychoanalysis. But basically, his thought was that our unconscious mind is what we should be focusing on, because that's what influences our behaviors. And his theory breaks down the mind into 3, or our personalities into 3 different sections: the id, ego, and superego. And if you've taken my other psychology class, you know all about that, right? And you don't need a recap. But for those of you who this is your first psychology, I will give you a brief overview. So the id is your bad side of your brain. That's your unconscious mind telling you to do weird stuff all the time. That's the stuff you want to keep like locked away down deep inside you, and you don't want to listen to it. Your superego is the complete opposite. That's like your guardian angel, your Jiminy Cricket, telling you what is correct and right and good in the world. And your ego is how you decide to go on these things. So it's kind of a compromise between your id and your superego, duking it out on your shoulder. I like to think of it as like the devil on your shoulder is the id, and the angel on your shoulder is the superego. And then you are the center, the ego, deciding what you should do. Behaviorism is our next one. And with behaviorism, they basically believe that we should only be looking at observable behaviors. Everything else, canceled, disgusting, get rid of it. So all behavior can be explained by environmental causes and not internal forces. So these are the people who came up with classical conditioning and operant conditioning, just conditioning in general. So, like with discipline, if a kid does something wrong, you might put them in timeout in the corner. And that's an example of behaviorism because you're observing the behavior that they're doing and you're reacting to it in a way. So you're conditioning them to behave in a certain way. Humanism, you place an emphasis on free will, personal growth, and self actualization. There is only room for good vibes in humanism. We don't want any of that negative energy here. We only look at how we can improve ourselves and be mindful of ourselves and grow personally. No one else has anything to do with it. It's just a focus on you. This is what we need during online learning. We need the positive vibes only. And then cognitive is our last one. But also, I think it's the most interesting one because this is where you would talk about the different aspects of the brain. And cognitive psychology kind of developed as a critique on behaviorism. So cognitive psychologists came in and they were like, hey, behaviorists, that's all well and dandy that you can control children based on things you're making them do. But please don't neglect the brain. We need to know how our internal brain processes are reacting to different stimuli in our environments. And we'll talk more about the brain in our next unit. Aren't you excited? I certainly am. And that's it for our Schools of Thought on Psychology. Thanks for watching my video. Please like and subscribe. No, just kidding. You don't have to do that. See you next time, though. Good day.